Hello, 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 Gin and Tonic Show. It's Friday. It is the 26th of of April, 2019, and it's already Friday. Again, thank you very much for joining us, everybody. It's a pleasure having you here, and I'm hoping that lots of people are going to participate, lots of people are going to comment, lots of people are going to ask questions, make comments, or whatever. As always, I would like to start by saying that we address Islam here, okay? Yes, we do talk about other gods as well, but primarily this is about Islam. We critique, we use facts, reality, and reasoning. We do not attack anybody personally, okay? We condemn categorically any abuse, oppression, slavery, or violence. We embrace free speech and criticism. So if somebody wants to criticize us, go ahead, please try and make it factual and constructive criticism. Now, what I think, we're decent human beings. Okay, we don't need a god to be good people. We're not people who rely on the morality of some book or other. Like the same way as I don't get morality from Moby Dick, I don't get it from the Bible or the Quran. The idea is, if you want to comment, question, correct, or you're simply curious about Islam, you've come to the right place, all right? And if you're watching this when it's not live, because we are live on Fridays, 8 o'clock p.m. UK time, then you can either go and join the live show on YouTube, or you can send, well, preferably Rob and a message on Facebook, and then he will send you the link and then you can join us on the show. We're a little bit difficult here because we have been porno bombed by people, and you get weird Muslims sometimes who um, send funny things here and then they report us thinking that they can damage us. So what we've done is we've put some things in here that sort of circumvent that, so that you can't immediately go live and go crazy and I can just check you out. But we do welcome people. Okay, we do welcome people joining us. Now, what we do normally is we go and say something positive about Islam, because that is something that I'm not shy to do. You know, it's not, there's nothing wrong with showing that there's something positive in Islam. It's the bad part of the ideology that we critique. Stops is a bit soft on the microphone. Okay, let me see if I can check.
It sounded good to me. Good evening, Thunderous.
Good evening.
Hello, Mister. Okay.
Maybe you're a bit soft compared to Thunderous. Hopefully, I'm okay.
Yeah, it's a different microphone, I must admit.
I think you're sounding actually quite fine over at my end. Both of you seem to sound with very much the same volume.
So Scarlet
that sounds
Fox, I'm sorry, then you will have to jack up your headphones or whatever it is. Okay, welcome to you from Germany as well. And like I said, we're not shy to say something positive about Islam. What we are doing at the moment is, even though in discussions, I want to get away from the book. I want to get away from always looking at the individual words in the Quran. Now, if I'm talking to a Muslim, they should know what the Quran says. So it's not about the individual words, it's about the ideas. I criticize ideas. And if somebody says to me, well, there is no slavery in the Quran, well, then there's something wrong. Okay. And if somebody says there is no slavery in the Quran, there is no point discussing Islam and the ideas with that person. So I'm trying to get away from this. I'm trying to get away from looking at the individual words, because here we are doing exactly that. We are going to read the Quran from beginning to end, and we're doing it like in a very slow way, very thorough way, going, looking at individual words, definitely the sentences, and trying to find out what they're telling us. Now, we're reading this from a non-theist, from a non-Muslim point of view, the way it is written in the Quran. And that is the way that it should be understood. Okay, in the 21st century, this is how we're used to reading books. If a God wouldn't know that we're in the 21st century and we're going to read books like that, he should have changed it. So a God should be able, especially if it's all powerful, all merciful, and all knowing, it should be able to change the book on an hourly basis, so that it corresponds with reality, and it sort of conveys the wishes and the commands in a language that I can understand. So Have you seen genetically modified capture and Armin Navabi on the trip to Israel? Yeah, that's brilliant. Eh? There's going to be more, and I'm looking forward to them. This could be quite nice. Right. What verse are we picking up from? Well, we're starting. The last time that we ended was on the Hajj or something in 215, if I remember correctly. The charity. Oh no, we're on charity. You give shall go to the parents, the relative, the orphans, the poor, and the traveling alien, and any good that you do, God is fully aware thereof. So this is. But before we do that, I need to tell you something positive about Islam, and for that I've taken a hadith, a Sahih Bukhari 1, Volume 1, Book 4, number 159. The Prophet performed ablution by washing the body parts only once. I think that's very good. Washing yourselves. I mean, in Islam, actually, it's only half good because it's not about hygiene. It's not about bacteria. It's not about germs because God didn't mention those things. So I don't think that this God actually wrote the book because he didn't mention this. So I don't know. But then this was number 159. In number 160, it gets better because then the Prophet performed ablution by washing the body parts twice. That's good, hey? That's good. So if you wash something twice, I think it's better than washing it once. So you can choose actually, which is also good. So you can choose. The Prophet performed ablution by washing the body parts only once. And then it says the Prophet performed ablution by washing the body parts twice. I don't know how that works, but you can, maybe you can choose. I don't know what the hadith say.
Probably better than not washing it, I guess. Yeah.
Welcome, Rob. What are you going to tell us about this? What is your idea?
Well, it's probably better than not washing at all, right?
And that's the point, exactly. This is why I'm putting it into the good section. Once or twice, what do you think?
Yeah, no, that's all good. See, we
Once or
can
twice,
find good
both are
things. Hey, Thunderous, what's your thoughts?
Any washing is good washing, better than no washing at all.
Yeah.
Okay, so that is once or twice doesn't really matter.
I'm trying to get a Muslim to join us here.
That'd be
it's
nice.
difficult.
Jinn&Tonic, did you notice that Aaron Ra makes the same stuff as you? I would say he's the one who's copying you. I mean, reading the Quran. Well, I contacted him like, I don't know, a year or 2 years ago. And I suggested to him, because he made some comments, and I said to him, listen, can I help you with Islam? Because you're making some fundamental mistakes there. And he said, yeah, let's get together. So I said, okay, well, let's do this. And then he got a bit ridiculous because he said, well, then you need to pay attention to my schedule when I'm where. I said, Aaron, I'm not going to follow your schedule. We're big boys. We can just set this up. I don't need to go and look at your schedule, and I don't need to read what you're writing on this. I'm just talking about Islam. Yeah, but all right, then next week I'm going to be in, I don't know where it was, I think it was actually in Berlin. And I said, okay, well then what hotel are you at? And then I'll just, I'll come over, we can sit down. And then he said, well, I need to move it but didn't. And then I said, well, what happened to you? He says, well, didn't you read this on my schedule? I had to move everything by 2 weeks. I said, I told you, I do not read your schedule. Yeah, but then let's leave it. So, so I said to him, okay, because I was going to suggest to go through the Quran a bit and go through some parts so that you know what you're talking about, but it didn't materialize. So, I mean, I offered my help. What more can I do? I'm not, I'm not worshiping the guy. I think, in the beginning, I really loved the way that he was going through things. I think now it's gone a little bit to his head where, he thinks now he is somebody. And I'm sorry,
Yeah.
but I don't agree. Okay, so if we finished off on 215, let me just see that I can pick up
Are we going to do any
216.
crazy comments or go straight in? I don't mind either way.
Oh, let's have crazy comments. Oh, I forgot about
You
this.
just have to share the screen and then we'll have to scroll down
Yeah,
to
I'll
find a few
have
of them.
to find which of my screens has the crazy comments. Here we are. Thanks. Screen to share. Okay, can you see this?
Yes, I'm on the mobile, so it's a bit small, but I'm sure you just have to scroll down to find the appropriate
Okay, how's
ones
that?
because there's some positive ones as well. Yep, that's all good.
No, I'm not. I'm on the. Why is he jumping all the way to the right and I can't jump to the left?
Also, present your screen to everybody, because when I talk or Thunderous talks,
Yeah, I'll do that. Present to everyone. Right, there you go. And for some odd reason, I cannot focus on the left. He always insists on showing me something on the right too.
that
So
looks
I
good.
cannot.
Yeah, we can see that. That's fine like that.
Okay, so this is a video by Content Over Everything, where Adnan accuses James of being paid by unknown entities, and James denies this. And this is what he calls offensive jihad in Speaker's Corner. And he links to Adnan's video, and then we get some crazy comments. Why is Fatnan? Okay, I think this is primitive. Hey, if people make fun of names using autism as part of attack, it is Adnan. You don't need to call him Fatnan. I mean, he's stupid enough as it is. You don't need to go play childish games, try calling him names.
By the way,
James, before this, was atheist. Then go around and around, complaint Abdur Anbari Shafian son. He never sincerely want to have debate. He just want to mess around and twisted the words.
yeah, of course, he brings the sources. It's all printed out there. Everything's hunky-dory. But of course, they're not having this, right? Don't bring them evidence and sources, right?
Maybe this was not a debate. Maybe this was just trying to bring, some education to the people. Just trying to show them something, to show where they might be going wrong. Maybe he was just educating people. This was not a debate. Mega Kostak. Adnan gave his best impression of Usain Bolt. Okay. Reach out and touch faith. James is in Depeche mode. Oh, that's clever.
Is Thunderous unmuted and available to speak? Because you did set it, so he came
Yeah.
after you. Oh, you're good.
Oh, yeah, I'm okay. I'm just listening
Cool.
to you.
Okay, cool. I just want to make sure you're available.
Wait, did Adnan Rashid point out that James was autistic? Before I comment, I just want to
There's quite a
confirm
few
this.
comments that are critical of Adnan.
Poor Adnan has never been the same since James destroyed him a few weeks ago. Now he just makes claims he couldn't dream of backing up. Yeah, but he's always done that. He's never made a claim which he was backed up, which he was backing up. Do you remember with Professor Myers? He said, well, the Quran says is one comes after the other. And Professor Myers said, well, then it's wrong because it's simultaneous. Yeah. Then the Quran is right because it says simultaneous.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
So, this is how he backs up his claims. He says, well, anything is true. As long as I tell you that it's true, then it's true.
I think this is obviously not quite so biased a channel. This is Content Over Everything, which is more. But if you go to the Muslim version of this, oh my word, you won't see a positive comment in sight for James. And Adnan is the best thing since sliced cheese. So we're getting a much more balanced view here. That has to be said.
Well, it says James made it Adnan look like an utter fool here. So this is very anti. Okay, God became a human. Jesus, Allah became a book. Quran. That's clever. Uncle Jamal looking fresh in the back, suited, boozed, and geez. James with his liberalism. Christians who support Islam are gathered here. Okay. Okay, I can't find anything else here.
No, there's so many positive ones for James there. So obviously this wasn't the channel. SC Dawa, I think, is the one that's.
Should I look for SC Dawa?
If you just type in the
SC
search thing,
Dawa.
SC Dawa, James Adnan. Just in the search bar up top there, you probably come up with it. James Adnan or something. There's the channel. That's the one. Yeah.
What's Easter? Random age, fruit, 52.
Now you'll have to go.
Oh, this is a busy channel.
Yeah. They got lots of stuff that they're going.
Oh, this is the guy who did the copyright claim on me.
There's hijab. Now, ocean of fallacies. If you go just up further up, I don't think he captured Adnan and James. Higher up, just go a little bit. There you go. That one there, yeah. If you just go in there and type in, so he was first speaking to hijab about liberalism and Sharia versus treason and that sort of stuff.
Wow.
But if you look at all the comments here, they won't be. And Adnan popped his nose in and said, no, he's not speaking to James, but he decided to butt in anyway, right?
And just as a sort of a teaser, I am working on the hijab debate with Tabash, and I had a couple of hours. It's just that I don't know. It's crazy. I have so much time that I'm getting nothing done. And suddenly I'm carting around tons and tons of soil, and I didn't know that if you buy soil, you don't buy it in kilograms, but you buy it in liters. It's the craziest thing.
Oh,
And then
never heard of that.
you have different soil types which you need to distribute to different parts of the garden depending on what kind of flowers you want to plant there. And I tell you, this is crazy. So I've been hauling soil. My hands, my shoulders, my back, everything is screaming like crazy.
Oh,
Then
dear.
because they said that like they said this year is going to be even hotter and drier than last year. Now, the study here is pointing south, and it's glass all around. So last year I nearly died in here. So I now had air conditioning installed, and there I offered to help, which I shouldn't have done because I make things worse than better. So, my whole body is like crazy, and I'm not getting things done normally in a quick way. So, all right, let's look through some
There you go. You
Muslim.
won't find. You could just start with the first one and start reading down. I don't think they'll be able to
James is
help you.
hypocritical. I'm pretty sure he realizes himself being contradictory to the law. Being a straw hat cowboy in a debate isn't suitable at all. Oh, is he wearing his cowboy hat?
Well,
Ah, okay. And yeah,
that's a
that's of course.
well, that's a substantive response against James's position. You'll find here, you won't find a single response in this. I bet you won't find a single response that says, hang on a moment, James is wrong with his sources and here's my evidence. What's the bet?
Yeah. No, all they can do is go and criticize his hat.
It's just ad hominems, right?
Yeah, and this is funny. Ad hominem. Do you know that most Muslims think an insult is an ad hominem? That if I tell somebody you're an idiot if you think this, they think you're using an ad hominem. I said no, that's intended to be an insult. An ad hominem is something completely different. Learn these things. And if I'm telling him then that he is wrong because this and this is the evidence, he says, yeah, but this is a strawman, because he thinks that a strawman is if I'm saying something that is not true. So it's quite strange. James is a very dishonest person. Okay, he's a liar and someone who likes to take things out of context. It's a waste of time to speak to him.
Now, if he's taking things out of a context, then must out of context.
Oops, you're cutting up quite bad. Okay, I'll read the next one. He argued until he agreed. He continues to argue, then again he agreed. James knows a lot about everything until he's questioned or countered, in which case it's obvious that he really knows nothing. But it's good to see you keep trying, sort of brave. James will cut off the discussion in between, will try to impose his subjective understanding on the Islamic teaching. Duh, that's what everybody's doing. He will not accept it. He will not accept it. Okay. He will not accept the so-called modern system is no different in the root of treason. Okay, I don't know what that is.
You still there? Hello?
Yeah. Are you sounding funny?
Rob, you're very intermittent. If not, you disappear altogether. Stops, are you there?
Yeah.
Okay, it's just Robson.
Why did James dismiss the Yaqeen Institute as garbage?
Dawah brothers, please avoid debating these guys.
I just heard Rob say avoid debating.
Spend your precious time discussing with genuine people. Who's that?
Andros, did you just hear Rob?
Just reading through the notes that are on screen with reference to hijab, I find it amazing that Islam seems to require more faith in scholars for dollars and universities and sheikhs of today than actually relying on Islamic sources. That's what James is doing. James is relying on the Islamic sources, whereas Muslims are relying on the Islamic scholars for dollars in today's age. So that's where that's where the differences lie. It just seems that if you're relying on today's interpretation by the Muslim scholars that we have today, then you're really, it's just a measure of deceit and dishonesty, if that's what you're having to do, as opposed to relying on the Islamic sources. Because as we've said on the show before, the Islamic sources, that is the Quran, the Hadith, they are the authority on Islam, not Muslims. And it just seems in today's day and age, Muslims are the authority on Islam and not the Islamic sources.
Yeah. It's quite seriously. How many times is James going to strawman an argument, intellectual dishonesty? MH is making one point, he's arguing another.
Yeah, but that's just another Muslim repeating what another Muslim said. He has not come to that conclusion himself. He has not thought, oh, there's a strawman there, or that's an intellectual dishonest comment, because you can see a pattern developing, and it's the same pattern because they've copied, cut and paste, with their own mind, phrases and sound bites that they've read or heard from other people in a way that, okay, this will work on anybody reading the comment, but it's also going to make me sound smart and clever as well, as if I understood the argument in the first place.
Yeah. Okay. The strawman with a straw's hat.
Yeah.
Favorite topics to straw man are apostasy and slavery.
His own parent on to prove his fallacious understanding. Now, are these the kind of, when you look at the name Abdul Qadir Mustafa, does that kind of does that give you a profile of a person that actually understands what these words mean, or the argument
Absolutely
they
not.
in the comments?
Absolutely not. Yeah.
There you go. Point proven then. That's what you find with, in the same way that scholars for dollars repeat, cut and paste from each other, the same way the audience repeats and cut and paste from each other.
Disbeliever laughing after getting exposed. They love this. I've got this Boma guy always telling me that I got exposed, and I don't know. It's so funny, but he's so shit scared. I told him, well, send me a PDF of your book and I'll critique it, and I'll do it in a fair way. He says, no way, I don't like you. So I said, okay, so you don't like me. That's why you're afraid of me critiquing your book, or what?
But I think the comment section on any like with Muhammad hijab and such is very much a great example of the audience that's listening to the discussion that we're having tonight as to why debates are a waste of time with Muslims, because what you're seeing there is pretty much what you're going to get if you went to a live debate as a debater or as a member of an audience, as to what the reaction is going to be. That is to say, when you have two debaters, one pro, say, Islamic and one against any Islamic doctrine, all you're going to get are Muslims that are not going to sit there critically listening to the point of view of the person that's arguing against Islam. They're just there to support their man, to show favoritism to their man. It is irrelevant as to what argument or anti-Islamic or anti-Quranic or anti-Hadith argument is going to be presented. They're there to listen to their man, to support their man.
Yeah.
And what you're seeing in the comments is a display of the attitude of a Muslim in a debate. So it just proves what a waste of time, and how Speaker's Corner is just a waste of time.
Well, it's entertainment, and I find it quite funny if you can show by deconstructing this. Like it says here, sometimes I wonder how Muhammad Hijab gained so much knowledge. Seriously,
Yeah.
I need tips. Now, if what I'm going to do in my video, I'm going to show that he doesn't. He's just throwing in some sound bites, which makes it look and seem as though he does, but he doesn't.
It's very much when you listen to Hamza Sotzis, he uses verbatim of vernaculars and dialogue, which makes him sound smarter than the arguments he's actually presenting.
Yeah. We need to be more nuanced here. I mean, what does that mean? It doesn't mean anything. But people, normal Muslims will think, oh my God, he is so eloquent.
But then you read some comments down there and you'll see Muslim me 5 days ago, this guy is special. And if you look at the image is of a woman in a burqa, which is strange considering that Islam teaches that women have half the intelligence of a man. So I'll just take that comment with a pinch of salt, or half a pinch, because she's only half as smart, according to her God.
Okay, Rob, you back?
Yeah. Sorry, I don't know what happened with the connection there, but we're all good. So yeah, I've been listening in with the comments.
Any other comment? Yeah. Because otherwise I'm going to call it a day now.
No, we can move on. I think it just shows. I think Thunderous is right. It just shows certainly the gullibility and the ignorance of these particular viewers, right? For them, it's not about the content of what's being said. I mean, James brought sources, and Hijab and Adnan attempted to respond, I don't think particularly effectively. And this is what will happen, right? They can say the sky is purple, and the Muslims will cheer them on. It is very much like sheep, right? As long as their man is, there's some words that are coming out of his mouth that sound like they're in a coherent structure. They'll say that's good enough, right? So, but they know this, right? These guys wouldn't survive 5 seconds with a critical audience like the three of us or anybody else that's critical that's listening to this. But the ignorant and the gullible, they've got success every time they open their mouth, which says it all, right?
That's why they don't appear on debate shows or anything. This is why there has never been, with the exception of maybe one, and that's Shabir Ali, any Muslim debater that has debated anybody of any credibility. They've always handpicked any person that they've debated. And I think you guys are already aware that when you enter a debate, you pretty much have before the debate has started, set out some ground rules as to what you will and won't discuss, and how far you're going to go, and what subjects you're going to be covering, and how far and deep and such you're going to be covering them. So a debate, in when you look at what the word means and how debates actually manifest themselves today, are two different things. One I would consider as an open-ended argument on a particular discussion where it's no holds barred as long as you stay on the subject, and another one is where pretty much you have rules and regulations as to how far you're going to go with it, which to me sounds a bit like a curtailing, curbing, and chaperoning of the argument, which doesn't seem to make sense.
Yeah, well, it's anything to sort of have the debate, lean towards their side, right? So if you can curtail certain things or insist on certain things that suits your position, well, then you're more likely to try and make it look good, right?
Absolutely, because when it's very much a debate with the Muslims, very much like having a discussion on interfaith. It's always on the side of the Muslim. The Muslim has, if you like, the high moral ground to set what the precedence is.
Well, what we want to do tonight, one of the challenges tonight, because I was on Discord at one point and I tried to encourage a Muslim to come on. He said he's still studying. He didn't think another perspective was worthwhile and we're not doing it correctly, but he didn't want to come on and correct us. For example, I brought him the inheritance era, the good old knockdown. And we went through it step by step. There was a few other people on Discord who were non-Muslims who went through it critically, literally read it, did the additions there and then live, and all agreed that this was an error. But he wasn't having this, right? Because there's inheritance all over the Quran, and we can't just take these two ayahs, and there must be some answer to this, right? Which, of course, is what I expect, right? I expect that sort of response.
Of course.
But what I said today, and maybe you guys can assist me, is we can take almost any verse and we can improve upon it, right? So maybe our task, just on one verse that we read tonight, at some point, let's improve upon it to make it clearer, better to understand, whatever the case may be. Because he said to me, "What is?" I said, "Virtually any of the verses, we could add something to it that makes it more clear."
Can I stop you on that one? The difficulty you're going to have is that when you do that in English, what do you think the response is going to be?
Yeah, they might say, "Oh, well, you haven't. You're not doing it in Arabic, right?"
There you go.
But if you've got multiple translations, I think Stops hasn't got up Qur'an-X at the moment. But with Qur'an-X, you've got multiple translations, and we can read all three of them, right? And we could do it that way. But again, that argument of that thunderous, I guess, would be, if it's a case that we can't use or we can't improve upon it in English, then you're also saying the implication is that there could be something that is being missed there in English, in which case people that have converted to Islam, that have read English, should actually deconvert and first learn Arabic, first learn the nuance of Arabic, and then read the Quran and then convert. And if they said that, then I go, okay, cool. At least you're being consistent, right? But if you're claiming that people can take the Shahada and they don't understand Arabic, then presumably if there are any problems in English, they're reading these and accepting them. And you if you're an intellectually honest Muslim, you should be dissuading them from doing that. No Shahada should be taken unless you understand Arabic. So if that's the route Muslims want to go, cool, no problem. But then we can't discuss it in English either, and nobody should take the Shahada in English.
Fair point.
And that's logics, yeah. Can't beat that, can you? Okay, let's start with, we're on 215. Let's start with 216, which is, and I'm taking the Rashid Khalifa, the most benevolent, let's call it translation, even though I maintain it's more of an interpretation. But I like starting with this because, you know, it gives you the best possible version. And then what we can do is we can go to the, I have it set up so that we can go to the different, to the corpus, to the Sahih and the Yusuf Ali. So let's do those three or those four different translations and see if there's any discrepancy there, and if God would have been, you know, better by taking it into every single language there is instead of just keeping it in one.
So just before you start, somebody's asking in the chat there, who takes a shahada in English?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, virtually any English speaker, right? They might just mouth off the words in Arabic afterwards, but in order to understand it, right, understand what they're doing and understand Islam, they need to read the English, right? Which again, from my experience, certainly some of the people down in Speaker's Corner don't do, right? They're convinced by arguments of Muslims. They've never read the Quran and they take a shahada, right? So,
actually, you're opening a point. I need to find. I found somewhere a clip of someone mumbling the shahada, stumbling when it comes to the name of Muhammad, because this was unknown that the Prophet of Islam is called Muhammad. This was difficult because it was, and the Prophet, Muhammad. Yeah, Muhammad is his final messenger. So, what is the point of having somebody say there's only one God, but God, and Muhammad is his messenger, if you don't even know the word Muhammad and the function of the messenger? How can you say the Shahada, and how can somebody say, well, welcome to the club, you're now a Muslim, and if you leave now, we're going to have to kill you? You know, this doesn't work. And if you take the Shahada in English, then, you know, it makes the same sense as, even more sense than if you take it in Arabic, because you don't know. La ilaha illallah. What does it tell you? It doesn't tell you anything. You don't know what you're saying. So it has to be given to you in English anyway, because God, in this eternal wisdom, brought out everything in Arabic, but forgot to teach the humans Arabic. So, you know, what does that tell you about this God? This is an incompetent, bumbling idiot. I mean, any God that would do that isn't worth the title God. And if I were a God, and here's what Rob has been suggesting, I could do it much better. I would take my all powerful, all knowing, all merciful, and bring out a Quran in every language and update it every hour. Then it's correct, that it's you know, useful, and it would contain things that everybody can use.
yeah. Just before you start there, TDS Dave, my party trick is breaking wind, and it sounds just like the Shahada.
I'm reading that.
There are people who could do songs like that, isn't it? I've heard this.
Yeah. All right, stop. So where you go?
Who's God? Yeah, exactly. I don't know who God is. Fighting. Okay, we are on. We're in the Quran, the Islamic Quran, and this is the Cairo version, the 1924 version, and we are in chapter number 2. The way it was not transmitted, not chronological, but the way that some dude decided this is the right way with the and so on. So it's chapter 2, which is called Al-Baqarah, the cow, and we are on sentence number 216, 216. Fighting may be imposed on you, even though you dislike it. But you may dislike something which is good for you, and you may like something which is bad for you. God knows, while you do not know.
I mean, there's a trivially true statements there. I mean, you know, fighting may be imposed even though you don't like it. Just keep it up on the screen there, stop, so we can see it.
Oh, sorry, I'm just switching to the other translations.
You know, it's like the word prescribed. When you consider the word prescribed, you normally consider a prescription. It's what a doctor has prescribed for you as far as medication is concerned. He's almost writing this in a sense of medication. Fighting is prescribed for you, and you dislike it. But it's possible that you dislike a thing which is good for you, very much like medicine. Nobody really likes to take their medicine, but we know it's beneficial for you. And that you love a thing which is bad for you, well, that could be likened to, say, McDonald's.
Yeah.
but Allah knows and you know not, which is a pointless statement at the end. Allah knows and you know not.
It is, isn't it?
It is, he knows what? If he's God, he'll know everything, and we know that anyway.
Exactly.
It's a pointless statement. But
yeah, carry on.
As it continues, it's just how the verse starts. Fighting is ordained or prescribed for you. And but it's interesting. It says, and you dislike it, but it's possible that you dislike a thing. So this is that point that gets repeated with Islam and the God of Islam and the human being, that our inclination as human beings isn't for violence. Our inclination as human beings isn't to harm one another. Okay, but this is why some of those that Muhammad is speaking to dislike it. It's not their natural inclination. It's not their default to be violent with other human beings. But then it's trying to qualify it. But it's possible that you do dislike a thing which is good for you. So this thing that you don't like, this violence that Allah is prescribing for you, you actually might not like it. But the truth of the matter is, Allah is telling you it's good for you, even though you don't realize how much good it's going to be on for you. Do you see the way that he's trying to reason with them? He's basically saying, if you don't like it, then you're not understanding Allah and you don't understand yourself. And so it's that reverse psychology.
Yeah, just follow orders, right? Even if you find it unpleasant or you don't like it, just do what you're told, because Allah knows best, right? But again,
I just want to quickly go back on the words, because already there's somebody. It's the translation. It's this and this. Waisa is making a good point, because the point of it being in Arabic is so that the Arabs couldn't say, well, we didn't know. There was no messenger. So it was geared. The Quran is intended for the people in the area of the time, and that is it. And it becomes painfully obvious if you look at all the claims in the Quran that this is not intended for me, a person in the 21st century who does not speak, has never studied ancient Arabic. So that's painfully clear.
And yet,
now, I just wanted to point out the second thing. If we look at translations, I intentionally put the corpus in there, because this is the word for word, okay? Is prescribed upon you fighting, while it hateful to you. All right, so those are the words that the Quran is using if you take them literally. So you can't say the translation is bad here, because is prescribed upon you fighting. That's what it says in the Quran. And if you go one deeper, you can go here to the roots and you can see what they are saying. Oh no, I'm clicking on here instead of on the. So if I go to the roots here, I can see what it says is prescribed upon you fighting. So the kitalu is fighting, while it hateful to you, but perhaps you dislike a thing and it good for you, and perhaps you love a thing and it is bad for you. So in other words, you can't tell us that this is just down to translation.
no.
And you can't tell us that this is down to translation if people who are the experts, people who have studied the language, people who have got the scholar status of having studied the ancient Quranic language of ancient Arabic, and they are saying fighting has been enjoined or prescribed for you, and that is the way that it is. Prescribed is fighting. That is the way that it is in the Quran. You can't change that.
And it's interesting, because not only is it prescribed, it is prescribed even though it's against your nature, your inclination, your default as a human being. And
this is the point. Exactly. Fighting is prescribed for you even if you don't like it, but you need to do it.
Yeah. And the thing is, to see, for it to be in the Quran in this way, it must show the default of the majority of those that were listening to Muhammad, that there was a greater majority of those whose default was to be peaceable and reasonable. Otherwise, the verse wouldn't make much sense unless it's for the majority. Then if you go on a little bit further, it says, and that you love a thing, which is this thing that they love? Well, that thing that they must love, which is bad for them, can only be reasonableness and be peaceable. That must have been the thing that they love, which Muhammad and Allah are saying, well, actually, that's bad for you, whatever this thing that you love is. And we can only assume in the context of this ayah that it's talking about violence. So this is an audience whose inclination was to be peaceable and reasonable, that Allah is saying, well, it doesn't matter if you're reasonable or peaceable. This is actually quite bad if you like this. You need to be violent. And this thing about peaceful and reasonable actually that's actually bad for you.
And you cannot even judge for yourself whichever it is, but I can.
Yeah.
And I don't know if guys, do you remember Khidr, the green guy, and Moses, the whole story where he says, well, killing a boy is a good thing. And when Moses asked him, why the hell would you say that killing a boy is a good thing? And then Al-Qidr, the wise Al-Qidr, the perfect human being who is even more knowledgeable than Moses, says, well, because he feared that he might cause his parents disgrace by not believing in Islam. He might. There is a chance that he might do that. And that is why he killed him, because he could be doing something to embarrass the parents. Come on, guys. That's crazy. That's totally crazy.
Yeah. Why doesn't he kill himself? Because he might disbelieve at one point, right?
He might. We don't know, but he might. Yeah. Okay, should we go to 217?
Yeah, keep it on present to all stops because it's changing again.
Thanks. They ask you about the sacred months and fighting therein. And say means that he's talking to Muhammad. Fighting therein is a sacrilege. However, repelling from the path of God and disbelieving in him in the sanctity of the sacred mosque and evicting its people are greater sacrileges in the sight of God. Oppression is worse than murder. We've had this before.
Yeah.
They will always fight you to revert you from your religion if they can. Those among you who revert from their religion and die as disbelievers have nullified their works in this life and the hereafter. These are the dwellers of hell, wherein they abide forever.
Lots about that, hey? But I mean, just one thing. They will always fight you to revert you from your religion. Well, no, that's not the case. We're not fighting anybody, right? Unless you're claiming that we're using a war of ideas. But in the traditional sense, and we're not even doing that necessarily, but in the traditional sense, and especially today, that's not the case, right? I want to reduce the Muslim population by getting them to think critically, analyze their book versus reality, and to see that the two don't match, and therefore this is not a book from God, and you can't be a Muslim, right? But at no point do I want to invoke violence against any of them.
Well, if you go back to when Muhammad was reciting this, and thereafter when he just died, and you could say maybe the first 2, 3, 4 centuries afterwards, I don't recall any historical battle where people were forcing Muslims to go back to their previous religion, whether it was Judaism, Christianity, Zoroastrian, or paganism. I don't recall any situation like that. In fact, on the contrary, it was the Ridda Wars, where people who were willingly leaving Islam were forced to go back by violence to become Muslims again, to go back to Islam. And then obviously subsequently the wars after that were to convert people to Islam from whatever religion they were in the first place. So that has no historical backing that it ever has been a situation where they will try and fight you to turn you back from your faith. There is no historical evidence of that ever taking place. Yeah, if this is a book written for all time, and this verse was in heaven millions of years before it came to earth, then it's quite a pointless verse because it never happened.
But they're also saying here, obviously, because Muslims are presumably quote part of this verse, right? Fighting therein is a grave offense. I can see Muslims quoting this verse and taking the first part of the sentence and ignoring the rest, right? Talking about the graver offense, right? Graver sin. I mean, looking at the Yusuf Ali translation there in the sight of Allah, right? To prevent access to the path of Allah. Well, what does that actually mean? What could that mean? So here again, Allah could have been explicit. And what I mean by the path of Allah is da-da-da-da-da. Now you know what the path of Allah is. So again, to the Muslim in Discord, he's probably not watching here. In the sight of Allah, and we're looking at the Yusuf Ali translation there that Stops has got on screen, to prevent access to the path of Allah. And I tell you, the path of Allah means ... right? You can explain what that is. Who knows what that is? Maybe somebody can guess. Maybe they can make something up there. But that's what I can see this being a part of this being an apologetic verse, right?
But listen to the story in the chat. The Prophet sent 8 persons to follow the Quraysh and gather info about them, not to engage them and fight them. On their way, they saw a trade caravan belonging to the Quraysh and ambushed it. That's the verse backstory. Now, the funny thing is that the caravan that they saw was coming from Syria, was on its way to Mecca. And the story that this was the Quraysh taking the stuff of Muhammad and trying to sell it, that's bullshit. That's just, I mean, you need to look, you need to read your own text. You need to read your own stories, and don't deceive people. Stop lying, please. That's what I'm always saying. Stop lying.
The verse goes on to say, tumult and oppression are worse than slaughter. Now, yet again, another historical point would be there have been governments and world systems in place that have been absolutely disgraceful to the masses of which they were over. For instance, one can consider just after World War II, the Soviet Union under Stalin, or maybe under Chairman Mao, or maybe the situation for the Jews during World War II in Germany and Poland. And yet they were under, probably from a historical point of view, certainly in the last 100 years, under the greatest of oppressions that I can consider. There may have been moments in other countries, maybe Rwanda could be an example, South Africa could be another one. There could be others isolated, but they are the greatest because it affected millions, not hundreds of thousands. And yet, under such like oppression, you know, there was never any mass suicide or suicides taking place because life is more important, and there is an inclination of the human being to live. So when it turns around and says that oppression are worse than slaughter, I think you should ask anybody that's ever been under an oppressive regime whether they would have wanted to have died rather than continue to live through it. Because if they wanted to die, they would have committed suicide through it. And yet there is not, that I'm aware of, under any other kind of regime where people have started to commit suicide because the oppression was so bad that they would rather not live. Can you guys think of a situation? Because I can't. So that proves, this verse here is proved wrong historically, and under various and many contexts, whether it's religious, political, or even commercial.
Yeah, but the funny thing is that God gives you a permission to do something which is actually prohibited. Now, the excuse here is that oppression is so bad, okay, that if you take somebody and stopped him from running around the Kaaba 7 times, then he deserves to die. Now, what kind of a justification is that? This is exactly the point that Thunderous just made. I mean, how can a person who is put before the choice to be killed or to go to the Kaaba and run around 7 times? I mean, what kind of a choice is that? You can't take that. So for me, this morality that is being being displayed here is so sick, and it shows me how, I don't know how godless this actually is, because I cannot imagine any God telling me that oppression is worse than murder, especially if you stop someone from going to Mecca. That's crazy. That's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, we can think of rare cases where oppression might be worse, maybe occasionally in North Korea or something like that. But again, I agree with Thunderous. Our innate sort of view, as a human, is to live and survive, right?
Right.
You can imagine certain people wanting to commit suicide, but it's very rare, and most people will try and live through it, right, in the hope
Yeah.
that they can, survive.
There's a movie called Gattaca, and
I remember it.
then you'll remember on the front cover of many movies, if not all of them, they have like a little quote or caption to summarize what the theme of the movie is. This one has always stuck with me because I think it's pretty much symbolic of the human being, and the quote was, or the caption is, "There's no gene for the human spirit." And so when I read verses like this, it just makes me even more feel more repugnant to the Quran, because that is such a true phrase. There is no gene for the human spirit, so that even in such trials and tribulations and oppressions, the human spirit always seems to find a way through it. As I've mentioned, Rwanda, South America, as you've mentioned, North Korea, under Chairman Mao, under Stalin, under Hitler, the human being spirit still carried through in those oppressive situations. So that just proves not just the surah, the ayah wrong, but it just further enlightens how repugnant the God of the Quran is.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's go to 218. Those who believe and those who immigrate and strive in the cause of God have deserved God's mercy. God is forgiver, most merciful.
Well, I mean, those who are following Allah really would have to have that verse, because if you looked at the tail end of where 217 finished, it says, those who die in disbelief, their works will bear no fruit in this life. So basically, you know, it's a bit like, you know, if you've gambled on Islam and you back out, then you've lost your bet. But those who continue staying at the table on the wheel of roulette with Allah and his Prophet Muhammad, if you're betting on red or betting on black, then you know you're going to get your reward. You're going to get your just reward, so to speak. So he's yet again psychologically controlling the audience, that if you leave, you know, you lose everything, but if you stay, you're going to get everything.
Yes, it's carrot and stick, right? So first we've got the stick with burning in hell, and here's the carrot. Hey, if you immigrate, and then you know you can expect the mercy if you fought in the cause of Allah. So for those who believed and those who immigrated and fought in the cause of Allah, right? Strove and struggled is use of Ali's translation. Fought, he seems to mean strove and struggled. I mean, if we read fought, that normally means you're in a physical fight, right? But somehow strove and struggled is in the path of Allah is something so similar.
Yeah, but
So,
you can. You can take it, because look, what did Hitler call his book? Mein Kampf. What is that? My struggle. So it's the same thing. You can interpret it in different ways, but unfortunately, it's interpreted usually in only one way, and that is violent.
Yeah, I mean, I like to think how they're going to interpret it one way after 300 people who died at their places of worship on Sunday. If that wasn't jihad or an example of jihad, I mean, yeah, again, if jihad means struggle, then why is it jihad has been interpreted exactly the same way under any Quranic under any cultural language that these jihadists speak, their culture or their location on earth? They're understanding jihad exactly the same way every time.
Yeah.
But of course, they weren't true Muslims, right?
Yeah, it's quite funny. And the funny thing is, why would you have to fight in the cause of Allah? Why do you have any kind of fight? This I don't quite understand. I mean, if
it's
God,
all a test, right?
yeah, but
You don't
if
have
God
hardship,
created
and
me,
fighting is part of
knowing
hardship.
full well what I would be, I would not have to fight in the cause of this God who created me, knowing full well what I would be. It doesn't, it doesn't work.
You've got free will, and you've got to prove yourself, right? And proving yourself, as Thunderous mentioned, is doing things that you wouldn't otherwise want to do, because that's how you prove yourself to this particular creator, right?
Yeah.
So create you one way, which is loving life and wanting to live and hopefully thrive, and tell you to do the opposite, and that's the test, right?
Yeah, because you can't argue with this, because at the end it's like the usual 2 times thing, patting yourself on the shoulder, once on the left and once on the right, because it's oft forgiving, most merciful. Now, if he was merciful, he wouldn't have to forgive, and the other way around. And if he'd done his job properly, he wouldn't need to forgive or be merciful.
Yeah, they're all merciful and all just is definitely a contradiction. So yes, just another. That's just the carrot from the stick we had before.
Yeah.
In the previous verse.
Okay. They ask you about intoxicants and gambling. In them there is a gross sin and some benefits for the people. Now, if there's a gross sin,
gross
sin and some benefits for the, well, is it, this is the problem. Is it gross or is it gross?
Gross.
Is it, yeah, but is it net or gross?
I know. I was going to use that joke later, but you beat me to it.
Oh, sorry. Because I wasn't quite sure how to take it. Is it okay? It doesn't matter. And some benefits for the people, because I never know. Is there something there or is there not? Is it like a plus minus? Is it 50 points for and 70 minus? So it's minus 20. So the gross result is then minus 20, or how does it work?
Well, I think you might be getting confused with whether you paid the tax before or after you have to gamble.
But their sinfulness far outweighs their benefit. You see, again, this is it gross or gross? They also ask you what to give to charity. So the excess God thus clarifies, oh really, the revelations for you that you may reflect. Now, where is the clarification?
Clarifies. Actually, if you read it in the Yusuf Ali, you might find that the verse means something different, or says
Okay,
something
so
different.
let me go there quickly. Geez, I'm getting juke, share, cluck, present to everyone, go here, go up, go next, go down. There we go. Yes, I'm the world champion of mixing windows at the moment. Okay, so they ask you about the intoxicants. This is now the literal one. And they don't ask you about it. Okay, we have to go to the root here to find out what they actually ask you about. Okay, so they ask you about, and this is khamr. Okay, now khamr means something that covers. Okay, so if you go to Khamin Ra, you see something that covers. So this is like a tablecloth. This is like anything that covers the window, a curtain. But also, and this is now where the interpretation part comes in, it covers the brain. And this is why, because the Quran uses it in a wrong way, uses it in a funny way, where khamr is being used as a brain covering. In Egypt, for example, khamr today means wine. So if you go to a waiter and you ask for khamr, he will bring you wine. Well, I don't know if you're still allowed this today. But this is the way that it works, that today, khamr, the covering of the brain, is actually intoxicants. But it doesn't say intoxicants, and it doesn't say alcohol, and it doesn't say wine. It just says khamr. Now, this depends on how you interpret the word. So games of chance, whatever, yeah, this could be.
Yeah, you can see Sai International there has suddenly just made it wine and gambling, whereas you're
Yeah,
correct.
exactly.
The corpus says intoxicants, but even Yusuf Ali is saying wine and gambling, right?
Yeah. But it's not really wine. It's not there the word. In both of them is a sin and some benefits for the people. But sin of both of them is greater than the benefit of the two. Okay? And they ask you what they should spend in the surplus. Thus makes clear Allah to you verses so that you may ponder. Yeah, ponder. What is it that we have to ponder over? What am I being told here? There is something good and there's something bad. But the
Let's
bad
just
is worse than the good. So then what?
Well, the thing is, the verse in itself actually doesn't make sense once you start stripping it down. For instance, it says they ask you concerning wine and gambling, say, in them is a great sin and some profit for men, or benefits in some translations. So let's look at that. Wine is a great sin, but there's some benefit to it. So what's the benefit if it's a great sin? If it's a great sin, then you're sinning against God, so you shouldn't be drinking wine in the first place. But what is the benefit? And the same thing could be said about gambling, and we all know the phrase "the house always wins." So there's no benefit in gambling. So if it's a
well,
great
they could.
sin,
Well, Thunderous, what they could do is try and look for other benefits, right? So with drinking, it gets people together. They'll have like a time where it's like a get together, whatever, and this is a way of doing it. So therefore, they will look for something potentially outside of the alcohol, because I've pointed out to them that potentially one glass of wine per night, right, is not necessarily bad. The scientific evidence is ambiguous at this stage as to whether sort of one glass of wine. Some studies say yes, some say it might be doubtful. So we're not entirely sure. But if that were the case, and they only had one glass of wine, then Muslims will point to this and say, hang on a moment, but the Quran says there is some benefit here, but there's a greater sin. So for them, that means outlaw it entirely. Or they could say, like I've just said, hey, it brings people together in a community setting, but that's not outweighed by the sin of drinking too much alcohol, right?
but the problem you've got there, Robs, is that firstly, though I'm inclined to agree with you, particularly with something like red wine, because red wine is said to help if you drink it with a meal. The red wine is supposed to help break down the fats of the meal. That's that's open. I've read an article on that. Whether there's any substantial truth behind it, I don't know. But in Europe, a lot of European countries like Spain, Italy, and France that have a lot of red wine with the meals that they eat. It's part of the meal. So there might be some truth there. However, if it's a sin, then why does Allah talk about having people who die, their reward is rivers of wine in heaven? If it's a sin, then why is Allah blessing people with a product that's a sin?
Right. The response for that is that it's only a sin down there. Up there, it's not a sin because there the wine is different and you're in a different form, and it's wonderful up there. But it's not good down here. I've made the same critique, right? So
Yeah,
that's the response.
but wine is wine. The only difference I've noticed between the wine on earth and the wine in heaven, the wine in heaven in Islamic parlance doesn't cause headache, meaning they don't get hungover.
Yep.
Yeah, but again, and I agree with you. This is confusing, right? Because if wine is a sin here, but yet it's good in heaven, why not say, hey, there will be drink spring water here, because we all know spring water is good for you, right? And there will be waters of springing forth in heaven of even more purity, right? Now you go, oh, okay, so I know water is good for me here on earth, but I'm going to get even better water in heaven. Wow, I can't wait for that, because it's quenches my thirst. But instead, you get this thing of, hey, it's a sin down here, but you're going to get that same sort of thing up there in heaven, right? Because they could have easily made it something that is more consistent.
Yeah. Again, though, isn't it the hadith that says that alcohol is the handiwork of Satan, or the crafty work
That's
of Satan?
later in the Quran, which means that Satan was in heaven creating rivers
Yeah,
of wine.
rivers of it, not just bottles, but rivers.
But the point here is that number one, it says here that there is sin and there is benefit. So this is very unclear. And then says Allah makes clear to you. This is a contradiction in itself. The other thing is, if and this is where we are going to, I think, find a way of improving what the Quran says. So if I were a God, I'd improve it. But the thing is, me being a non-believer, me being a non-Muslim, I have had as much alcohol as I wanted today, which is zero. So, drinking alcohol to me, if it's not prohibited, is not a prescription. So I'm not forced to drink alcohol just because I'm a non-Muslim. And I don't think that a Muslim should be inclined not to drink alcohol just because they're a Muslim. It's because they don't like alcohol. I think that is a much better point. And that's how you get morality. That is how you get free choice. That is how you get, taking, well, your own conscience, and taking responsibility for the acts that you are committing, instead of all the time telling me, well, there's a God that told me to do this. That's nonsense.
I'll tell you what is nonsense, believing that Muslims don't drink alcohol. Believe me, growing up in the Asian community, I've been around many a Muslim's house at time, and I found their secret stash of vodka or brandy or whiskey. Don't believe it for a minute.
Well, let me, I haven't told this story for a while, because we had a delivery from a duty-free shop, and they stashed the boxes outside the house. And one of the boxes was on the neighbor's, well, in front of the neighbor's garage. And when he came home, he said, "Oh, this is on my side of the property, so I'm just going to take it." And our gardener saw this, and then my dad came home and says, "Hang on, there's a whole case of whiskey missing." Yeah, the neighbor took it. So he went to the neighbor and said to him, "Listen, aren't you a Muslim? Why did you take my case of whiskey? Number one, you took it from me; it's not yours. And number two, aren't you a Muslim who's not supposed to be drinking alcohol?" Well, Muslim said, no, number one, it's no problem because Allah sent it so that it is on my property. And if it's a gift from Allah, I'm allowed to take it. Number two, if I'm taking this whiskey, I can take it inside. I will close all the curtains and then I can drink it and Allah can't see me. There's
So
the
Allah
logic.
doesn't know all things then, does he?
There's the logic. And this is a story that really happened. Okay, this is not something that was made up or something. No, it actually happened to my father, and he came back laughing and said, "You will never believe what just happened." And, yeah. So there you go. This is the logic behind this, and this is the consequence of this sentence. Now, could a God? Now, if I were to put myself in God's shoes, okay, what is it that I'm trying to do? Now, people are getting drunk. Okay, people are whoring around, and they're not fighting for me. So I want them to fight for me. So I tell them, well, even if you don't like it, go and fight for me because number one, if you fight, it's good. I'm going to reward you. Number two, if you get killed, I'm going to get you into the executive lane where you don't need to wait your turn to get into heaven. And as soon as we have the end of days, then you're going to be one of the first guys in heaven. Number two, I want you not only to fight for me, but I want you to fight for me whilst not being drunk. Because when you're drunk, you're actually quite useless in fighting. So stop drinking alcohol and stop womenizing, because when you're pussyfooting around, you're not in the right mood for fighting. So I want you to do two things: don't drink, don't womanize. Okay, if you want sex, go and marry the woman, pay the price, and that's it. That's what I would do if I were Allah. And not tell them, well, there is something good and there is something bad, and I'm not revealing this in the right chronology, but people in 2000 years are going to give you the right chronology, and they're going to tell you that everything was revealed gradually so that you would slowly be weaned off the alcohol. Yeah, sure, I'm telling you immediately, stop drinking, stop eating pork, but drinking alcohol, I will do it a bit slower. I'm stopping you from womenizing immediately. I'm telling you, listen, pay the price or get off the women. That's it. But alcohol, nah, there I need to be a bit slower. Come on.
Yeah, often the case, right? And just a reminder, shout out, thanks TDS Dave. We'll probably go to an after show, which is on Discord. TDS Dave has added the link there. So if you are wanting to join us and continue the conversation after the live show, there is the link and you can join us. Somebody saying that verse was revealed in the beginning of Islam before it was forbidden outright in other verses, Jinn&Tonic.
That's what I just addressed.
Cool.
A plane load of mind-altering drugs to ISIL. I think the plane load of mind-altering drugs is called the Qur'an. Okay, whatever. So, any other questions from the chat? Does anybody think this is clear? Does anybody think this makes sense? Does anybody think that this is something that God would say? Is this something that anybody with 2 brain cells can improve on? I think so. Not so difficult. Okay, then let me do my magic again. Screen view, window, clack, share, present to everyone, and go here. We are going to 220 upon his life and the hereafter, that you may reflect. Okay, so God clarifies the revelations for you, that you may reflect upon this life and the hereafter. And they ask you about the orphans. Okay, that's a quick. And now for something completely different. And they ask you about the orphans. Bringing them up as righteous persons is the best you can do for them. If you mix their property with yours, you shall treat them as family members. God knows the righteous and the wicked. Had God willed, he could have imposed harsher rules upon you. God is almighty, most wise. No, God, you're not almighty and definitely not most wise. Otherwise, you wouldn't do this. Okay, anybody want to comment on this?
Stops, can you, we've got a Muslim who wants to join us, this Mohsin gentleman that's been in the comments there. So I'm just going to privately share the link with him. And then hopefully he can give us another perspective, right? I think he's been chatting in the comments there.
That would be a great help if somebody can give me any perspective, because I'm totally lost. What the hell is going on here? Why is it suddenly about the orphans?
Yeah.
What is now best for them? If you associate, then they are your brothers. But hang on, didn't God say no? You're not allowed to take the boys and adopt them. It's prohibited. So
Stops,
Allah
can you
knows
also
corrupted from the amender. If had willed, surely he could have put in difficulties, and He is almighty, all wise. Yeah.
Stops, can you just make sure that we're all set for new joiners?
Yes.
That we've got all those tick boxes
I
on,
set
right?
this up in the beginning, yes.
Okay, brilliant. Carry on, Thunderous. All yours, sir.
Well, I'm just thinking why the sudden change in direction as far as the ayah is concerned. It's not in the context of what's being said. It's just sort of like throwing it left field. We were talking about something completely different in the previous verses about doing the will of Allah, whether you like it or not, fighting, and obviously the oppression, and then going on to things like striving in the worst of Allah and gambling and wine. And now we're talking about orphans. It doesn't seem to, the narrative seems to be, it's not free flowing. If you're reading this, it jumps from one subject to another, and it's not coherent.
Right, I had to do a few things, so let me also have a look.
The best thing to do is what is for their good. So what do you need to do for their good? The best thing that you can do is give them an education, give them an outlook on life, so that they, in the beginning, can concentrate and focus on learning.
But the thing is, it's trying to take the high moral ground, whereas as human beings, our natural inclination is to want to do something good for orphans. I mean, for crying out loud, in non-Muslim countries, how many non-Muslim countries have if you like, NGOs or governmental organizations set up to look after orphans, to benefit people who are oppressed in society as best as they can. There aren't many non-Muslim countries or governments around the world that haven't got a protest or a protocol set up for the benefit of orphans. So it's one of those pointless verses. It's almost put there to make Islam look sanctimonious and pious. That it's holy and it's that there is an advantage to being a Muslim, whereas the reality is this advantage is probably better and more demonstrated in non-Muslim countries with reference to orphans than those in Muslim-controlled countries.
And why would a God stop this?
I mean, you don't see many orphans in the Western non-Muslim world begging for money, but you do see a lot of orphans begging for money in Muslim-controlled countries.
But the other thing there, it says the best thing to do is what is for their good. How do you know what's for their good? Are you appealing to people's sort of best nature, or again, could God not?
Well, this is why I like the Rashid Khalifa. He says, as a righteous person.
Yeah, but is that righteous from the standpoint of you're doing something good in the eyes of your Allah, that you're righteous, or is it subjective from the point of view as a human being, and you're doing what you're naturally inclined to do, even though that righteous act might be unrighteous in the sight of Allah?
That's exactly the point. This is what we saw with Al-Khidr that we just saw just a couple of sentences ago. So it could be righteous to kill somebody just because you fear that they might be doing something that would be bad for the reputation of the parents. That it is righteous to kill them. That's crazy. It's not.
Cool. Okay, so this fellow's not going to be able to join us. He's battling to get the link working here. And he feels now that he'll speak on the chat that Allah's will is against this. Presumably he means against this, meaning against him joining. So he feels that Allah's will is against him joining. Perhaps that's what I'm interpreting from this. From the statement, because we were just chatting on the Facebook Messenger to see if I could get him to join us. I'm presuming he's a Muslim. I'm not sure if this is the same Mohsin that I speak to on Discord. If it is, just give me a thumbs up, Mohsin. If you've never spoken to me before, it's not Mohsin on Discord, then give me a thumbs down, then I know. So
Mohsin, you realize this totally screws over orphans. Absolutely. This is the whole point. So that, again, like Rob said in the beginning, we can improve on every single sentence in the Quran. I could improve on this one. You could. Everybody could.
Yeah, you just have to say what it is, right? So he's giving you scientific method. Answer. Hello, Answer. Welcome. Haven't seen you for a long time. Hope you're well. Yes, you can improve upon this by actually giving those things that would be good, right? Because then you can match that with reality. Oh, we found these all good. Wow, look at that. Allah does actually know best, right? But if he's leaving it to you to decide what is good, nobody questions this, do they? They just go, okay, cool. I kind of know what's good, right? But how many of us actually know what's good, right? In the sense of like knowing everything about what's good. Very few, right?
Exactly. And then how is it possible then that you have people who blow themselves up and kill others? How is it possible that somebody will go and kill another Muslim? How is that possible? If you read all these sentences, it is utterly, totally impossible, and yet people are doing this.
Well, again, those quote bad Muslims will justify it that they are doing something good and they're going to get rewarded in heaven, right?
Exactly. Terrible. 221. Do not marry idolatresses. Don't marry them unless they believe. Come on. What kind of a morality is this?
Which one?
A believing woman is better than an idolatress, even if you like her. Nor shall you give your daughters in marriage to idolatrous men unless they believe. A believing man is better than an idolater, even if you like him. Okay, this doesn't make sense to me at all. These invite to hell, while God invites to paradise and forgiveness as he wills. He clarifies his revelations for the people that they may take heed. Okay, can somebody explain what just went on?
This is a plagiarism from what's already been written, but it's a more of a word salad, confusing way of saying only marry in the Lord. It's basically saying a Muslim should marry a Muslim and a Muslim shouldn't marry a non-Muslim, which actually you could put it quite succinctly. You know, Muslim should only marry Muslim, a Muslim should not marry a non-Muslim. Simple as.
What is an idolatress?
Somebody, obviously a female that bows down to objects and basically anyone has another god other than Allah.
Yeah, but how
Can you
can you
bring up
be
the other
an
verses?
idolatress if they believe?
Can you bring up Quranic? So have a look there as well.
For me, this is weird. What it says here, it
What I
it's a
do like is the
contradiction.
little subheadings in this version that you've got, right? There's like a tiny little bit that tells you whatever the author feels the verse is related to, right?
But in the Yusuf Ali, it's got idolaters in brackets. So really, if you remove the brackets, it's you do not marry unbelieving women.
No, it
That
says
would
polytheistic.
that's quite interesting because it's basically saying you don't marry unbelieving women. If it says don't marry, if it says do not marry unbelieving women, that would be any woman other than a Muslim. This is quite interesting because what it's basically implying then is don't marry a woman unless she's a Muslim or a Jew or a Christian. Could it mean that?
No, it's okay. And here we have the solution. Do not marry polytheistic women until they believe. So the magic word here is until.
But you can almost understand the logic. In fact, I hate to say I say this, but I mean, because it's a plagiarism of something that's already been written, I do actually understand the point that's being made here. And I think that's a logic that most people would want to apply in their life. You know, you wouldn't marry somebody of an opposing religion. That wouldn't make sense because you'll be living, if you like, by implication. As an example, if you're a Muslim and you marry a Jew, then you're basically marrying somebody that denies that the prophet you follow, you know, is a real prophet but a false prophet. If you marry, say, for instance, if a Christian marries a Muslim, then they're in effect saying, well, I don't accept Muhammad because he's a false prophet. Or if a Muslim marries a Christian, then the Muslim is basically saying, I've married somebody who's following a corrupted book. So you can see that the marriage doesn't have a good foundation or a good premise if your belief foundations contradict one another. You know, you're going to have a conflict, particularly if, you know, your lifestyles and your lifestyle directions, the plans and the futures that you have, and also if you start having children, there's not going to be a consistency there, and at some point it will, you know, cause a schism or a fracture in the relationship.
Okay,
Yeah,
and now
yeah.
a slave woman who believes is better than a polytheistic woman, even if she pleases you. So this is very and vastly different to what Rashid Khalifa is telling us. And
Yeah,
do
yeah.
not give in marriage your woman to the polytheistic men until they believe, and a one woman, a slave woman, believing better than a polytheistic man, even if he pleases you. They invite to the fire. I love it. Okay, so yeah, then at the end of the day, this is all about belief. So a person who believes is to be, preferred over others.
Yeah, so it's interesting that the first translation you read, right? That wasn't so clear, but here there's different versions. But it seems to be saying that a believing slave is better than a polytheist, or
Yeah,
in the other translation, an unbeliever, right? Even though
yeah,
the unbeliever or the polytheist is more alluring, go for the believing slave instead.
yeah. What it's basically saying is if you're a bloke and you've got slaves, but your slaves are munters, they're not particularly attractive, but there's a fit, you know, curvy, blonde-haired, blue-eyed chick over in the corner, but she's not Muslim, she's an idolater. Anna's basically saying, don't marry her, just marry the munter, because the munter's preferable because she believes in what you believe, whereas the fit blonde with, you know, with the blue eyes over there that's giving you the come on, she's a non-believer and she's going to lead you astray. So, you know, there is a logic there, but that logic has already existed in other religions prior to Muhammad saying this.
And the other thing that you see here is that you need to read multiple translations. Because if you take only one, and it happens to be Rashid Khalifa, you can see how bad it is. You can see that it's never, ever going to give you any kind of truth in what is actually being said.
But
This is why I always go to the roots, then I say corpus, and then Sahih and Yusuf. Yeah.
this is why I said, is it just talking about idolaters, or is it going to refer to Jews and Christians too? Because some Muslims can read this and say, well, I can marry a Muslim, but I can marry a Jew or a Christian as well. The Quran
It's mushrikun. It's actually polytheistic, really.
Yeah, it is if it's a Christian that supports the Trinity, yeah. But if it's a Jew, then they're denying Jesus and they're denying Muhammad. So that's a twofold rejection. So,
okay, this is further interpretation possibility that you include now the Trinitarians as being polytheistic. Yes.
What are you looking at there, Stops?
The individual words.
Okay.
To see that really polytheistic is what it says, that it doesn't include something else somewhere. Okay, shall we go to the next one?
Hang on one sec. And those invite you to the fire. So presumably the polytheist invites you to the fire in the sense that they don't believe and will take you astray, lead you astray, right? Which would ultimately lead you towards hellfire.
yeah.
I can't see the rest of you've swapped over, so I'm presuming that you're over there. Okay.
Do you want me to go back?
No, that's fine. And you can read it there. And while God invites you to paradise and forgiveness, as he wills, he clarifies his revelations for people that they may take heed. Well,
it's not revelations, by the way, it's signs.
Okay, let's go on.
222. They ask you about. Okay. And now for something completely different. They ask you about menstruation. Say it is harmful. Menstruation is harmful. Okay. You shall avoid sexual intercourse with the women during menstruation. Do not approach them until they are rid of it. Once they are rid of it, you may have intercourse with them in the manner designed by God. God loves the repenters and he loves those who are clean. Oh, goodness.
Okay, but hang on a second now. This is a natural act, right? That every woman does, unless they are somehow biologically unable to do so, which one would think is unnatural, right? So something that is natural, he's claiming is unclean, right?
Yes.
But it's a natural cycle. But do not approach it. Let's see what the other verses say there, just to see, because he's saying don't approach them until they are clean. So how far away are you from them, right? Are you allowed to touch them, or you don't touch them, or let's just see what the other verses say there, right?
And they ask you about menstruation. It's a hurt. So keep away from the women during their menstruation. Don't approach them until they are cleansed. Then when they're purified, come to them from where has ordered you Allah. Well, he hasn't.
Okay, let's read.
Indeed, Allah loves those who turn repentance and loves those who purify. Sahih says they ask you about menstruation, it's harm. Okay, Yusuf Ali says they are a hurt and a pollution. So keep away from wives during menstruation and do not approach them until they are pure. And when they have purified themselves, then come to them from where Allah has ordained for you. Indeed, Allah loves those who constantly repent and loves those who purify themselves.
Can I read my Yusuf Ali translation? It seems to add a little bit more detail that I find humorous. It says here, they ask you concerning women's courses. They say they are a hurt and a pollution. So keep away from women in their courses and do not approach them until they are clean. But when they have purified themselves, you may approach them in any manner, time, or place ordained for you by Allah. For Allah loves those who turn to him constantly, and he loves those who keep themselves pure and clean. Did you notice that? You can
that's on screen, by the way.
Approach them in any manner. What does that actually mean? Approach them in any manner, time, or place. What kind of image is that giving you about the relationship you're supposed to have with your wife? This is the most important human being that is going to be in your life, is your wife. And Allah here is basically reducing her to as being nothing but a sexual object that a man can approach however he wants, wherever he wants.
Well, I think there's different ways. Reactionary, welcome to the Jinn&Tonic show. Can I chuck you right in the cold water? What do you think about 2 and 222?
Good evening, everyone. How you doing?
Hello, good evening.
Let me see what the verse is, please, if you don't mind. On the
Can you
Can
see
you
on
see it on
screen?
screen? There's Sahi International and Yusuf Ali. If not, we can read it to you.
And they ask you about the menstruation. This verse?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Say it is a hurt.
It's
So
the
keep
same
away
sentence, just 3 different translations.
Okay. So keep away from wives during menstruation, and do not approach them until they are pure. And when they have purified themselves, then come to them from where Allah has ordained for you. Indeed, Allah loves those who are constantly repentant and loves those who purify themselves. Okay. So what I know about this verse is that it's pointing out that women, they have a month, is it a monthly period? Yeah, a period. Yeah. So the menstruation, which we know about. So
It's
and
not months, it's 4 weeks.
correct, yeah. So this 4-week period for the menstruation cycle, that when a woman is undergoing that cycle of her period, it's not permissible for the man to engage or to enter her for sexual relations while she's having a period. This is this verse that establishes that as being impermissible.
Why do you think that is?
Oh well, the answer is in the verse that where it says, Allah loves those who are constantly repentant and loves those who purify themselves. And in another section it says, and when they have purified themselves. So it's to point out that it's an impurity.
Why do you think that would be an impurity?
Because it's bleeding.
So how is that impure? If I cut myself, is that impure?
From an Islamic perspective, yeah. So when you do, if it's a significant amount of blood or bleeding, if you have a small cut on you, then what we're talking about is a spiritual impurity. So when you do wudu for prayer, a small cut on your hand isn't going to nullify your wudu, as it's called. But if you have a loss of a lot of blood, then you would have to do your wudu again. And likewise, when a woman's undergoing her period, it goes for a number of days. So during that period, she's considered impure, and she can't pray. She can't do the salah during that period.
So if God creates human beings,
Yeah,
this creator God, and then there's a design flaw that the stomach is not working properly, and suddenly it breaks, and you bleed like crazy internally, do you have to do wudu?
Well, if you pray, like if let's say, I don't know about the word design flaw, if I agree with that. However, if let's say somebody undergoes some medical issue where they lose a lot of blood, then they're considered spiritually impure. They would have to do the ritual wudu again before they pray. And when I say pray, I'm talking about the specific prayer called the salah. As for praying to God, communicating with God just personally, there's no harm in doing that. We're talking about the standing of salah.
How come this creator God has made a lot of women more randy just during their period?
More randy during their period? Sorry, did you say more randy during their period?
Yes.
Is that a fact?
Well, by experience, yes.
Okay. Don't know. Well, there could be a number of reasons for that. I don't know.
But
I don't know if that's true.
Reaction, is there anything for a man that makes him impure at any stage during the year, either as consistently or even less consistently, or is it only a woman that seems to us to have this natural cycle that is claimed to be sort of what's the words there, depending on the translation? What is it? Unclean, hurt, and pollution. I mean, is there anything like that in your experience that a man has where a woman needs to stay away from a man? Because it does say stay away, right? It's not just don't enter her. It says they keep away from your wives during menstruation, which seems to me not just to mean keep away from, having intercourse, but keep away from them, right? Or it's not, at least it's not clear there.
Yeah, so the interpretation of this is that to stay away from them sexually. You can still sleep with them in the same bed. You can still touch your wife, hug her, and no problem. There's a few things she can't do. One of them is pray. Another one is touch the Qur'an without gloves.
Okay,
and
hang
I
on.
think
Okay,
going in the mosque as well. And don't forget as well. Today we have tampons for women. In those days, or menstrual pads. In those days, they didn't. These things don't exist in all parts of the world during all times in history. So,
but some periods have existed in all parts of the world, and I dare say that they will have improvised with whatever local custom, some kind of improvisation. They simply would not. I think the image you might be giving is that women at certain ages, in certain times, of walking around with blood free flowing down their legs, which I don't think has any historical point in the past, or any image. Culturally,
you would be surprised that even in today's day and age, in London, England, you'll come across some women who have not been educated on how to take care of themselves during their period.
Even the images of tribes in Africa and South America have women covering their vaginal areas. So the image of a woman walking with a vagina or genitalia open and blood flowing down that is a very hard image to consider as a reality. I find that hard to believe. I don't mean to be rude, reactionary.
That's all right. No. This is a fair point. I'm not saying that all women don't know that, but there are still some women in all times and all places that haven't been educated.
That sounds like an individual woman that might have a mental problem. I'm talking about per se cultures in various locations around the world, historically speaking. When you look at the imagery and drawings of women of them times, the artistic impressions of those contemporary artists have women covered in modesty, so that you can fairly assume from that point that because they were slightly advanced and they're not prehistoric in their thinking, the further back in time you go, they may have been unsophisticated towards the sciences, but from a moral point of view, there was certainly a morality that existed, which history proves to us. So the thought that they didn't have some kind of creation or invention to absorb the blood flow during that period of time, I think is a hard push thing to try and sell, that some women in cultures or religions or social circles at a particular time did not have a means to, if you like, collect that blood in some kind of way.
Yeah, I mean, they might have done.
Okay, but the point is, why make it impure? This is what I don't understand.
Well, I guess there's a couple of reasons. I'm sure there must be some physical impurity about it,
because
as well as a spirit. First of all, if Allah says it's impure, then we take that as impure. But the spirit, what we're talking about is number one is a spiritual impurity. That's what prevents her from praying. If it was simply a case that it's a physical impurity due to the bleeding, but you could stop the bleeding by using pads and whatever, then she might be in a pure state to pray physically.
Yeah, but why design a woman to bleed and then say she's impure and then it's bad that she bleeds?
Yeah, that's curious, isn't it?
What do you mean that it's bad that she bleeds?
Well, it's harm. Keep away. They hurt. It's a pollution.
Oh, okay. Yeah, but that's a number of days a month. But look, what is the purpose of a period? So if a woman doesn't get pregnant, what happens? Her body goes through a process to I don't remember the details scientifically about it, but what happens is a woman, her body is prepared to accept sperm to produce a baby.
No.
Right? But the period happens when she doesn't conceive, and therefore it cleans her out.
No, what happens is that 2 weeks after ovulation,
the
womb is reduced again because it's getting ready. During ovulation, the cycle goes that the womb is then increased so that it can receive a zygote, which then has more matter to go and attach, and then provides the space for the placenta. And if this does not happen, this skin is being shed again, so that it doesn't stay in the state of being a receptive for a zygote.
And that's what the period does.
It's actually a blastocyst, but it doesn't matter. And this is the whole period. So is there a better way of doing that? Absolutely. You don't need to do this. You could have a process where ovulation only happens if the woman wants it and if the right amount of sperm are nearby. Then this would eliminate the process of having to go through menstruation every single month, every 4 weeks, without anything, without the necessity. It's very easy. And now today we have pills which regulate this anyway. So this is all a bit backwards. This is something that I would have 2,000 years ago. But why have it in the first place? Why wouldn't a God be able to design a process where a woman doesn't have to have menstruation? And if it is a natural thing that this is the process that has been designed, why make it into an abomination? Why make it into into a pollution? Why make it into an impurity? Worship it.
Well, this is the I guess the point of diversion, that we don't, as Muslims, we don't question God in His decisions.
Okay,
God,
okay, that's
right?
the decision. Yeah, that's the explanation.
Yeah, ultimately.
But
how are you supposed to learn anything when first of all, you don't have to ask questions if the answer is given? I mean, the Quran makes the claim that it's a book made clear, a book easy to understand. We're asking questions because clearly on this subject alone, the book isn't made clear, hasn't made anything clear, and it certainly isn't easy to understand. Now, the whole point of asking questions is that we get answers, hence why we ask questions, and we've been created with an insatiable curiosity. And so questions are asked. It's part of our psyche to ask questions and also to get sound, qualifying, logical answers. But you're saying,
that's fair enough. I'm saying that point number one, the way I look at things, or a Muslim would look at things, is number one, they don't question God in His design. They accept that Allah is the Almighty in His wisdom, knowledge, and His creation, in His ability to create. Now, number two, if we do examine these things and do ask these questions, which are valid questions, to look into the reasons that why Allah would have created something in this way, you will tend to find incredible examples of benefits by examining these things. You'll start to see, whoa, wow, I didn't consider that. There is an advantage to this. There are several advantages. I haven't done that, so I can't answer those specific questions. But I'm sure if you were to look at maybe Muslim researchers who've looked into this topic, they will have found all sorts of benefits in God's design.
I agree with you. For instance, let's just say, for instance, okay, right, God has designed a woman. She has a period every 28 days, which is, the process, the biological process of what's being put there. And I understand that sexual intercourse during that period of time is certainly inappropriate. I accept that. But the question is, why is a woman having a menses a sign of impurity? God's made the woman, designed the woman to have menses. He's saying when she has the menses, she's dirty, she's impure, she's unclean. Why is that the case? Now, scientifically, you can explain why she has a period and why it's not beneficial for a man to have intercourse. Those things are no-brainers. Fine, we can understand that. The question being asked is, why is she impure during that period of time? What is it that makes her impure? Because Allah has put that system in place by her having the menses.
Yeah, so she's impure to stand in front of Allah and pray to Him in salah. But she's also impure to be approached by a husband to enter her for intercourse.
Yeah, no, you're not going to get any further. This is it.
No, this is the point I'm trying to get at. So you're asking, why is she impure? Well, those are the types of impurities that we're discussing, those two impurities.
One of them is logical. A man having sexual intercourse with a woman that's having a menses is a logical impurity. That
you accept that.
As a man, I've actually done that not knowingly with a woman, and I could certainly confirm it is a very impure situation to be in. Right. Having said that, but God, who has put the process of the menses in the woman's biological system, this has been mapped out from when she was conceived in the womb, that she was going to be a woman. And at some point in life, this biological process was going to kick in. So from the age of, say, 12 or 13, she starts having a menses. So why is it that this process, which is a biological process that Allah has put into the genes, take place when she reaches a certain age of maturity? Why has He decided when this biological process kicks in, is she considered unclean during that period of time?
Let's think. I'm not sure about the impurity part. I don't know if I can answer why God chose something. That would be me questioning him. But I can also look at the one of the reasons why she wouldn't be considered suitable to pray while she's on her period. So you have experience being with a woman who's on her period. You know that while she's on her period, her personality is not the same as when she's off her period.
Oh, come on.
Right?
Oh, come
Okay.
on.
So when she's supposed to be in prayer during her period, now she's not going to be focused on her prayer the way she would be if she was not on the period.
Actually, I've got to stop you there, because I think, even when they're having when they're frustrated or they're angry or they're annoyed, men can also approach God probably more frequently than a woman in an inappropriate state of mind. So I think the idea that when she's emotionally imbalanced in that period of time I think that's a crafty spur of the moment deflection, which isn't going to work. And I say that respectfully, because men are more prone to be distracted during prayer than women are.
Yeah, but that's one of the reasons why men are not allowed to approach the prayer if they're drunk. And then eventually the ruling came down to ban alcohol altogether.
I said distracted, not intoxicated. There's a difference between the two.
The intoxication distracts you from your prayer.
But what about when a man is angry or annoyed or frustrated, or when he's sexually aroused, or there are many things that a man can be in a state of in his frame of mind. No man is 100% focused on his prayer towards Allah at any one given time. That's you're being dishonest there. Women are more inclined to be more focused on God than men are, because women aren't so motivated in a fleshly way than men are. If you look at, say, the system that we have in the world today, men are more easily distracted than women are. As an example, pornography is aimed at men, not women, because men are more affected by pornography than women are. Materialism.
It's not quite the same. I think you're kind of mixing up.
I don't think we're going to get anywhere. I think Reaction said very clearly that this is what you need to accept. He doesn't know why it's this way. It just is. And that you will not get any kind of explanation. You will not get anything out of it. It says here that they are impure and that they need to be purifying themselves to be able to ready for intercourse again. And that is the way that it is. It just is. I don't think we can get anywhere else than that.
Okay. Yeah, and I think there was confusion in the chat anyway. People thought we were against this in some way. What the question that was being asked is, if God has created this process, A, created women, but B, created this process, and then said that it is harmful or hurtful or it's pollution, why would God do this? And Reactionary said he's not entirely sure. But not only that, it takes away from her praying, which, if God wants you to pray every day, he's now created a process and given rules specifically to avoid her praying and doing certain things on these days. So he himself has implemented or instituted this process, one could say natural or God-given process, that restricts a woman from praying, right? So he obviously, in his mind, then it seems to me, he has decided that there are certain days of the week, or month, should I say, where he does not want a woman to pray, and he's explicitly saying that. So saying that everyone should pray every day is in fact not the case, because he himself has implemented something that he expressly says they should not pray every day, right? So that's kind of where the question was going.
Okay. Yeah. But there's somebody in the chat is saying, you people are disgusting. Okay, so do you people have intercourses with your wives?
Well, that's not the question being asked.
We've made it clear that we don't.
Number one, I don't have wives. Okay, and if I'm having sex with my girlfriend, that's okay. And if she's on her period, there are different levels of intensity at different stages, and there are different things that you can do. And at the end of the day, this is only blood. I'm full of blood. So if I have some blood on the outside, if I cut myself, if I have some blood on my penis, it's very easy to go under a shower and wash it off.
Oh man, it's just an image I didn't want.
It has no long-lasting effects.
Well, anyway, that's a personal choice. I'm not sure
that there's
exactly anything scientific to say that it is in fact
up to you.
Harmful. If there is, then obviously we can point to that. Otherwise, we have to, quote unquote, take it on.
We could do a quick search on Google, maybe. What do you reckon? Is it worth doing it?
No, you try that and see what you come up with. We'd have to take some time to look at it.
I think we're going to enjoy verse 223 when we get to it.
All right, let's move on to that then, shall we?
Okay.
Okay, 223. Your women are the bearers of your seed. Thus, you may enjoy this privilege however you like, so long as you maintain righteousness. You shall observe God and know that you will meet him. Give good news to the believers. I don't know, this doesn't.
Can I read the Yusuf
read
Ali?
the other
No,
version.
let me go across to the other ones because this really does not make any sense at all.
I'm not sure why you're using this translation, Stops. It doesn't seem to be that clear. Right, so
This
we're
is the
always
whole
going to the
point.
Qur'an.
This is the whole point that I'm trying to make, to show that there are different translations, and this is the most benevolent one, and this is the one that I would use if I were to be, in a position of a Muslim to try and show people how good Islam is, and that's why I'm showing you
Yeah, but I mean,
exactly this one
Sahih
first.
International is quite on the benevolent side, right? They've modified things. They're quite modern compared to Yusuf Ali there.
I'm just
So
trying to show that there are very, very, very different interpretations, and this is the most benevolent one that I'm using at the beginning. And then when we go to reality, we see that
But
there's a lot
doesn't
of
seem to
different.
make too much sense, though. So you have to go to these to actually kind of make sense of, okay, I
Okay,
mean,
I
that one
can
we could
leave it. It was
understand.
just for me. It was fun reading a different version altogether, which
I mean, can you add it
doesn't
in here?
give me
Because there's
that.
various translations here. Presumably, it's not one of the translations in Quranics.
No, definitely not.
Okay.
No, this is so way out. No.
All right. Let's read Sahih International because that's more modern. Presumably,
So your
that
wives
you
are a
would.
place of sowing of seed for you. I don't know what that means. So come to your place of cultivation. Okay, however you wish. Okay, that's a bit different. And put forth for yourselves and fear Allah and know that you will meet him and give good tidings to the believers. Yusuf Ali says, however, your wives are as a tilth unto you. So approach your tilth when or how you will. So in other words, this is like an open field. Okay, you've just put a groove in there, and now what you're doing is you're planting strawberries or I don't know what. But do some good act for your souls beforehand and fear Allah and know that ye are to meet him and give good tidings to those who believe.
Well, let's hear what reaction he's got to say. What's your view on
Yes.
this one?
Excuse me. Sorry, I keep coughing. I've got a little bit of a cough. The verse is talking about your wives being a tilth, or basically it's a point in which you place a seed for a child to grow. This is what it's referring to. It's describing it using the terms of agriculture. So you could say it's a form of eloquence or good language being used instead of.
How do you account for the thing that you can do whatever you wish in any way that you want, any place that you want, and just now it says you can't?
So what's being described here is what is permissible in terms of having relations with your partner. So it's saying that a man can have relations with his wife anyhow he likes, from any position, any direction, as long as it's in the correct place in which the seed can be planted, right? So in other words, you cannot have sex in the I'm trying to use, yeah, exactly. I'm trying to be polite. So, yeah, it's only in the vagina that a man can enter. But any position is acceptable. So,
okay,
there's all sorts of positions.
I think the historical point on this verse is really some women only wanted it in the missionary position.
Yeah.
And the fact was, Allah is now saying, well, they might want it in a missionary position, but I'm giving you the right to approach your wife however you want. If you want to give it to a doggy style, you can give it to a doggy style. If you want to split the cicada, split the cicada. If you want her to straddle you, let her straddle you. But, or if you want her to straddle you, rather, you can enter your wife's vagina with your penis however you want to. She's just a field. I mean, you can use the term reactionary, it's eloquent, but the truth of the matter is, historically, there is no eloquence here. There is no. It's base level dialogue.
Well, how do you describe a base level human activity of having sex?
It's not base level. If God's put it there, it's not base level when an intimate.
Yes, you're the one describing it as base level. I'm trying to tell you, it's a human act that people do. We're human animals in the sense that we reproduce, we conduct sexual relations. But it's not unrestricted. There are rules put in place by God about how we approach our wives. So one of the rules is that we're not allowed to approach them through the anus. It has to be only in the vagina.
Actually, he does not mention the anus or the mouth. He's talking about approaching your field as you like. So he's reducing the woman as to being more than a field, and a man has the right to approach that field however he wants. Now,
but it's not the whole woman that's considered the field. It's her vagina. It's the place where a seed can grow. So this is Arabic. It's a form of Arabic.
No. We're not talking about whatever, other countries or cultures, they have a phrase, every hole is a goal. We're not talking about that here. We're not reducing it to that base level. We're talking about penis and the vagina.
But this is saying not every hole is a goal in this case.
But he's
not putting a restriction.
Stop distracting and deflecting. We are not discussing the penis entering any other orifice. We're talking about the penis entering the vagina. That is it. Yeah. We're talking about an attitude of where a man, irrespective of what his wife's desire is, he can approach her, however he wants to. Now, if that when I say it's reduced to a base level, you have to bear in mind that other surahs and hadith that also relate to this. For instance, a man, if he wants to have a sex with his wife on a camel, she is not to resist him. Also, if a woman does not consent to having sexual intercourse with her husband, the angels will curse her all night until the morning. When I said it reduces to a base level, I'm on about the attitude that Allah has towards women, in the first place. This is reducing the woman at the very base level as this is more than a sexual object. Now, intimacy, I'm not denying, intimacy is the most beautiful thing that exists on earth. The way that a man and woman can make love to each other, there's nothing greater than that, really. There really isn't. It's a fantastic intimacy to have. Nothing can replace it. So we're not talking about that in that sense. We're talking about it the way that Allah is referring to the woman in this situation, that a man can approach her however he wants to approach her, whenever he wants to approach her, or whatever location he wants to approach her. And if she resists him, the angels will curse her.
Yeah, without good reason. If she denies him without good reason.
You've added that part on yourself. This is the part, where
that's the understanding of it.
Without good reason. Yeah. Do you think? No. Okay, let's just on that subject. Have you had?
Calm down, relax.
Have you had relationships reactionary?
Yes.
So, do you think that when a woman, have you ever been intimate with a woman?
Actually, sorry. If I speak about reactionary hasn't, because reactionary is an online avatar. But
you then.
So, all right. So the answer is. What are you asking? Ask a question.
Have you actually been intimate with a woman?
Let's say yes.
Okay, let's say yes. You either have or you haven't. Come on.
Well, I don't need to say yes or no. I mean, okay.
It would make
if a man has had intimacy with a woman, continue.
Okay, if a man. That sounds very Game of Thrones. Hey, are you Arya? Is that your avatar? So the point I'm making is, women don't just say no for no good reason. There is a pantomime that takes place for a woman to feel that she wants to be like that with a man. There are certain roles that a man has to play in order to make the woman want to have him inside her. It's not a case of a woman just says no for no good reason. That's not true. There's normally a reason, and the normally is because a man operates on the physical way, whereas a woman operates on an emotional level.
We are not a sex therapy session here.
No, the point I'm making is that when reactionary said that a woman, for no good reason, when a woman denies her partner intimacy, there's normally a very good reason why. It's not a case of, it's not weaponized.
Great, you've made your point. Okay, great. But what the point I think that we're trying to make here is it says your wives are a place of sowing a seed for you. So a woman is something that receives something for the man and is then responsible for processing this. The next thing is you can go there however and whenever you wish. So in other words, the woman has no choice. So the husband, the man is the one who determines the level and the time and everything. And those are the points that we need to take from this sentence. And now my question is this really the best? If I were a God, I would say, listen, do whatever you want, however you want, but only with consent.
Okay. So what's the question? Sorry.
No, this is just my suggestion.
Oh, okay.
If I were God, that I would make it a lot better than the way that this God has written in his book.
Okay. All right.
Rob,
understand what
any
you're saying.
comments?
Yeah, well, I mean, it just seems to me, obviously, that this is a one-way thing, right? Presumably, there's nothing in the Quran reactionary to your knowledge where a wife can come to a husband in whichever way she wants, right?
I'm not sure if the verse applies in the reverse as well. It might be the case. I'd have to ask about it.
It seems like it's man-centric in that sense, right? The man has got the power over the woman, and she needs to follow suit. Is the way that it seems to be.
No, the question that I had is if a woman wants her husband to have relations with her. So it's if the demand is coming from the woman in this case, is the man required to fulfill her request? And I'm not sure. I think that applies in that direction as well. But in terms of,
doesn't say so here though, right?
Yeah, no, it doesn't specify it in that way.
What it is.
Yeah.
And that's on the backdrop of 222, where we've already read that you may approach them in any manner, time, or place. That's about the man approaching the woman. And that's the point I was trying to make, that when you add up all these verses and hadith, the image is very poor as to the woman's role in the role of intimacy with the husband.
So Thunder, what's the point of a relationship between a man and a woman? What's the point of a marriage, for example? What's the ultimate purpose?
It's all based on the emotional level that you're supposed to complement each other. That's one man, one woman, not one man and 4 women, or if you're Muhammad, 9 women, or 8 women, 8 women and a child. So it'll be one man, one woman, and the whole point is that you share life together, in a way that you grow through life, grow in intimacy with each other, in a friendship, a companionship. And in that companionship, you have a role of intimacy to play. Now, for some, it could be, the more you have intimacy with the person, the closer the bonds are on an emotional level with that person become, but also that you can create children as a result of that intimacy, and each child you have is a different version of the mixture of the chemicals, which are fundamentally the same, the male and female. So that would, that's a short, brief summary I'll give, but we're not getting that from Islam. We're getting that women are a field that you just keep spunking up, and you should be, basically women are incubators.
Well, here's why I'll slightly differ with you, because we are getting those points from Islam as well, because Allah in another verse is telling us that the husband, and I don't remember the verse by memory right now, I'd have to look it up, but it's where a man and his wife are a garment for each other. So you seek comfort in that garment. That's referring to the emotional aspect of it. There's also a number of hadiths which talk about the best of you is the one who is best to his wives.
Can I add that reaction? We did that a few weeks ago, and there was different translations. One said garments, and I actually, if you look back at that show, I actually said it was probably one of the most beautiful things ever written in the Quran. I actually agreed with it, to describe that the woman is a garment for the man and the man is a garment for the woman is actually a beautiful way to describe the relationship between the male and the female. So I have actually commented on that. However, Stubbs brought out several translations, and the translations conflicted with each other as to what the word garments come from.
Yeah, but what I wanted to say is that it's not looking just from one perspective. The Quran, I think, is accepting the fact that there is more than one aspect with regards to a marriage and the needs of a man and the needs of a woman. It's not just emotional. It's not just
true, but we're looking at what the Quran,
love and affection. It's also physically. Physical desires as well that need to be fulfilled, and this is addressing all of those aspects.
It's not addressing it from the man's point of view, and then when you further add on to that reactionary, that image that you have in Allah's heaven is one man with 77 wives. So the image is further, if you like, reinforced in the position that Stops, Robs, and myself have towards the Quran, in the very image that your Allah provides in the Quran as to what the spiritual heaven looks like in the man's role with how many women is going to get up there.
Okay.
Actually, would you I don't know, condone if a woman, a Muslim woman, came up to me and proposed spontaneous sex.
Hey, who's that woman?
If a woman approached you and did what? Sorry.
And proposed spontaneous sex.
You haven't been on Tinder, have you?
No, I've been chatted up in a pool where a woman came to me and said, "Come on, join me. Let's go out and have a shower." So, is that something that you would condone if it were a Muslim woman?
Maybe she needed somebody to scratch her back or something. I don't know. But sorry,
Hey,
you've blown me away with that. I can't imagine that.
No, it's just a question whether you condone that, whether you say yes, that's perfectly okay.
I would say for a Muslim woman to go up to any man, whether they're Muslim or non-Muslim, and say, "I want to have relations," just like that.
No, if a woman were to come up to you or to me or just to somebody, to a guy, and said,
Yeah.
"Come over, take a shower with me."
Okay, so Islamically, that's not permissible. Yeah, you need to be married.
That's exactly the answer that I wanted to know. Whether
Yeah.
you think, no, this is not something that should be possible. So you are saying it doesn't matter whether but it's also not permissible for the man to propose this, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, so they need to be married. You need to pay the dowry and all that, and then only is it permissible after a ritual.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So you can say to your wife, your wife can say to her husband, "Let's go have a shower," as you said. Yeah, that's no problem in that.
Okay.
Move on to the next one. Stops. I mean,
I think we should take a break here because now it's getting like a little bit more spiritual, and I think we should stop here because it's just going to change the topic again.
Okay. I mean, did you expect any other response with regards to that
I just
question?
wanted to know if there are modern day Muslims today who would say, well, look, it depends on the circumstances, and if both are single and both, because we actually just said, look, sometimes, it's physical needs as well. So if a woman is randy or a guy is randy, and then they bump into each other, they like each other, and they have sex, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that from my point of view. So I was wondering if it's the same, if the case is the same, if you have a Muslim, a modern Muslim, the way that reactionary is, what the views are of a modern day Muslim.
Well, presumably, even modern day Muslims wouldn't have that the other way around, right? If they were being consistent, right? A Muslim man wouldn't go up to a non-Muslim woman and do that, and say, "Come and have a shower with me," presumably. So I'm presuming that it would work if you were consistent Muslim, which I think reactionary is in that sense, that they wouldn't have allowed it any which way. So
I don't think there is such a thing as a consistent Muslim.
that's quite true, actually.
All right. Well,
difficult to find consistency.
Well,
but Rob's position is correct, though. It's like regardless
I was just curious as to why you would ask him, because I didn't expect him to say anything else. I mean, I know you view it differently, but I'm not sure you'd find any Muslim that would say that's okay. Maybe you would. I don't know.
I think Stops was saying that is identifying the physical need aspect, which we were talking about. Yeah. And saying if there's a physical need and the only person in your vicinity is just some random individual who you're not married to, could you?
Sorry, I'm laughing. Somebody on the chat is saying, "Is it fun? If not, if so, if it is fun, then it's not Islamic."
So is that a regular thing that happens to you, Stops, or is that just?
No, it happened to me once. I mean, you'd be so lucky, Ducky. No. This happens once in your lifetime. That's it. No.
Sorry, I got a cough.
Just before we close, because I think you're right, Stops. Good point to stop here. And you may or may not want to engage reaction because we're going to finish. But I did hear a recent hangout with yourself where you seem to not want to answer some of the less pleasant things in Islam. Is there a reason? There was somebody who was chatting with you that I heard at some point, and you seem to not want to talk. I don't know. I can't remember if it was apostasy or whatever it was.
Are you reading Pakistani atheist comment? Is that what you're reading?
No. Is there something?
Yeah, if that's a comment that he's posted, then he's probably referring to a chat I had with James SC.
I actually haven't read the comment there, but if you're saying there's something, I'll have a look. But no, there was something, and you seem to not want to give an answer. You were a great politician. You danced around it. So I just presumably you wouldn't want to ask me either or answer me either. But I was just wondering. I was curious as to why you didn't, because presumably there is a there is some laws around that, and I was just wondering why you didn't want to give a straightforward, because you've given straightforward answers here. So I wondered, was it only to him, or if we asked, would you give a straightforward answer, or what's your view?
No, it's certain people come occasionally to my channel and try to, what's the word? They put certain scenarios in place to try and edit the video and take snippets and make me look a certain way. Right? So I'm aware of the editing that takes place because it's already happened in the past with certain other channels. And then they presented a bit of footage of me saying something which wasn't correctly representative of what I was saying at the time. So I'm cautious of people asking me certain questions, and I will, if it's somebody I've spoken to in the past and then they're coming at me again with the same questions, then sometimes I'll just play games with them and avoid answering their questions.
Okay.
So, yeah.
But presumably, if we came to those verses, you'd be open to discuss it here on the show. If it came up, and you would give a view then on whatever. I'm not sure if it does. I can't remember off the top of my head. Okay, that's fine. I was just curious at that stage.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, Sops, should we bring it to a close and go to an after show in Discord?
Rob, did the guy from Speaker's Corner who said, well, show me a mistake in the Quran and I'll come and discuss it with you. You gave it to him. Did he ever come back to you?
Which guy is this?
This is this Indian guy who thinks the sun shines out of his arse.
Oh, no, he's never come back. I did chase him up a few times. Well,
he thinks the sun shines out of his arse.
I wouldn't use those words personally. Shabir Yusuf, you mean? No, he's never come back, and I don't think he'd ever come on the show, right? I gave him the inheritance ever. I gave him all the evidence for him. Literally, I spoon-fed everything to him, and I was hoping he was going to come on, and he never did. Right? And I actually put it to a Muslim today, right, on Discord. We read the verses. We actually had non-Muslims in there who were curious about this era. They did the calculations and so forth. They were quite critical. Hang on, Rob, there must be a way around this. What have Muslims said, blah, blah, blah. And they went and did it all themselves. And they eventually came up with, you know what? No, it's an error. So, no, I don't think anybody will ask that. And so reaction, when we get to Surah 4, around 4:11 and 4:12, if you're ever on there, you best prep for that or not come on at that stage, because that one obviously we feel is a knockdown error.
Did you watch Muhammad Hijab's video discussing
Yes.
Yes, yeah. That was.
Did he explain it, or how
no?
What is explaining? He gave us a lot of words, but none of that made sense. Is that an explanation? I don't know.
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
Yeah, and if the explanation differs from the Quran, then we're in a bit of a problem, right? If it explains something that is unclear, right? But if something is clear in the Quran, and then other people have to that I think is demonstrably an error, and then the scholars have to go and find a way to quote explain this error away. That's not the same as explaining a verse which might not be entirely clear. So I think there's a difference there. So when the word explain is used, in my view, it's used incorrectly with regards to those verses, because that's not an explanation. They have to correct something that is straightforwardly an error, especially if you're going to add it. I'm not going to put you on the spot now, but that's going to come in Surah 4 anyway, in which case, we will have that discussion. But
that's next year.
Well,
it gives me time to research it. I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, okay, everybody, give us a thumbs up or a thumbs down. It's the first time I see no thumbs down. This is the first time. Amazing.
Muhammad Islam has had this conversation, right? Because he's listening in here, right? We got down to with Muhammad Muhammad Islam here. We got down to the point where he agreed that the Quran said for the parents it was 1/6. And the scholars said it was 1/7. And I said to him, hang on a moment, how do you reconcile this, right? You have two different numbers. Here's what the Quran says. Here's what the, quote, scholars say, right? And his response was that it explains the Quran. And I said, hang on a moment, what explains the Quran? The number that the scholars give explains the Quran. So 1/7 explains 1/6. Now, I do ask any of you that are rationally thinking people, how 1/7 can explain 1/6. Right? That's not a rational position. That's what we got to. I'm sure it was with him. So of course that's an irrational claim, right? So, but that's why this is so powerful, because there's no way to explain this. You have to correct it, not explain it. It's not like something that we don't know or that's unclear. It's perfectly clear when you read the verses. Anyway, that's the topic for another day. Anyway. Yeah.
What we do in the after show. Very good question, Mohsin. Thank you for that. The after show. The point is that it's not a panel which is restricted but anybody and everybody can come and ask and talk about anybody regarding anything Islam. Okay, so this is not there's not a segregated area here where we have the panel with 3 or 4 people or whatever, and people ask questions, or we're going for a topic. It's just an open topic. Everybody can go and chime in with anything.
Yeah, so there'll be a voice section in Discord if you haven't been on. To type in the chat, then we'll have a look and help you. But there's a number of names on the side, and we'll be in the after show voice chat because you'll see some of our names there that'll be in there, so you'll know where to go. If not, you just type into a chat, and we'll look to see if we can help you get on there.
And answer, there's no adding to the after show. You just click on the TDS Dave link on the Discord, and you are in.
Link again.
There's the link again. So answer, just click on this and you're in.
Yeah, you can download the app for your phone. You can download the app for your computer, or you can just use your browser, and that'll take you straight in as well. You've got to create an account if you've never done that. That's quick and easy. Once you've done that, then you're available. There's lots of servers. I go on there during the week and chat. That's where I am mostly. I don't go on Hangouts anymore. A lot of people are on Discord, and they have various servers, and there's some interesting discussions. So that's the place, I think, to be if if we're not doing live shows and you want to chat to people during the week or at other times.
Okay, and let's have a little bit of fun because our favorite village idiot has now finally launched his book. What is quite funny is that if you take a book called Becoming by Michelle Obama, with 450 pages, she's selling this for under $14. And our Kenny Boma is selling his Patriot shit with 182 pages for $19. Can you believe it? $19 for
maybe
182
he feels it's more valuable
pages.
because it's not necessarily the size of the book that's
it's economics.
Yeah, it may not be the size of the book that's valuable. It's the
quantity.
Information. So clearly he feels that his information is more worthwhile than hers, and he can fit it into less pages. But again, Stops, hopefully he will send you a copy that you can review because
no, he's declined.
Oh, okay. That's
no,
he says if he's got a good book and he feels like it's truthful and it's accurate and it's concise, then clearly, he'd welcome critiques or other perspectives, right? That's what you would think.
No, can I give you the reason why he is not going to send me a PDF file to critique it? He doesn't like me.
Okay, but that's irrelevant. In fact, that could be, a good thing to do because
even more of a reason. Exactly, he doesn't understand it.
Because if you bring up something that's demonstrably like idiotic, then he can expose your idiocy, right? So if you don't like him and you make an emotional response or a critique that's easy to respond to, then that just shows what an emotional person you are instead of critiquing it honestly, right?
But the thing is that if you want to bankrupt him, it's very easy. All you need to do is buy a book by somebody that he endorses, because he has promised, and this is on video, he has promised that if you buy a book from that other person who proofread his book, where in the introduction I found several spelling errors already, but that doesn't matter. If you go and you buy a book by this lady, he will send you his book for free. So all you need to do is buy a book for $5 by this lady, and his book worth $19 he will send to you for free. And I've asked him, are you going to live up to this, or are you going to be lying about it like you usually do? He said, no, I'm going to do it. So I said, okay, I want to see that this is going to happen. So I'm going to buy a book by her, and then see if he's really going to.
You better do it online, right? Stops. You probably don't want it sent to your physical address, or maybe you got a PO box or something.
No, I'll find a way. Anyway, so I thought this was quite funny. Okay, the hadith, the normal hadith of the week, is also in Bukhari, and it's volume 1, book 4, number 162. So Allah's apostle said, if any one of you performs ablution, he should put water in his nose and then blow it out. And whoever cleans his private parts with stones should do so with odd numbers. And whoever wakes up from his sleep should wash his hands before putting them in the water for ablution, because nobody knows where his hands were during sleep.
That does sound a little odd, especially the cleansing of certain parts with stones. I mean, you ever heard that reactionary?
But it must be odd.
Yeah,
now.
yeah. So when you go to the toilet as a Muslim, you and you finished urinating, or even defecating, you may not have toilet tissues with you, right? If you're out in the desert somewhere, or you've gone camping and you don't have any toilet tissues, what do? So you would use stones to wipe yourself if there's no leaves around, or leaves. Sorry. So stone is a method of cleaning, wiping yourself.
Yeah,
but why must it be an odd number?
Odd numbers. So Islamically, we're encouraged to do things in odd numbers, and that's because God is one, and if you divide a number that's odd, you'll end up with one, something like that. Anyway, but odd numbers, odd numbers are like even numbers plus one, so you get one in the end, and one is
great.
So you're constantly reminding yourself of
I call that superstitious nonsense, but it's okay.
Yeah, superstitious and monumentally, obviously superstitious.
That's interesting. But
doesn't Allah even swear by the odd and the even?
To be honest, it is effective. Like all these little things constantly, when you're doing them in your daily life, they cause you to remember God.
Okay, so why does Allah swear by the odd and the even?
Let's not go
there. Where? So
this is what we do on Discord. This is what you do on Discord. This is the kind of thing that you talk on Discord. Okay.
Yeah.
Then, guys, thank you very much. We'll see you next Friday, where we are going to continue reading the Quran. We're going to start off with some crazy comments. Maybe, we never know. It's going to be a surprise. See you next week.
Thanks for having me on, guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming on, and thank
Thanks,
you for giving your opinions. Thanks, Rob, Thunderous, and
Join us on
see you
Discord.
next week.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.